Hello, I'm Clarion from Clarion Call Fiber Arts, and welcome to part 4 of my guide to reclaiming sweaters. In this video, I'll show you how to quickly and easily take apart an irregularly shaped cardigan sweater. We'll be using the magic thread method that I demonstrated in part 2, so if you haven't seen that video yet, I recommend you go do that before we go any further. Go ahead, I'll wait. Are you ready? You'll need a seam ripper for this, and the sweater that you selected using my guide from part 1. This is an irregular cardigan. When you have an unusual sweater shape, you really need to pay attention to where your seams are and how your sweater was put together. Turn your sweater inside out and take a look at how it was assembled. Knowing how your sweater was put together will help you take it apart. Every sweater is a little different, but generally they follow roughly the same rules. Always start with the side seams or the closest approximation and follow intuitively. Opening one seam will lead you to which seam is available to open next. The sweater has two arm's-eye seams, and it does have side seams that start here at the sleeve cuffs, but the side seam also doubles as a center back seam, which in turn attaches the peplum to the rest of the sweater. This peplum piece then becomes the front placket and then turns into the collar piece, but it's all one long piece of knitting. There's a center back seam here on the collar, and the only other seam I see is the seam connecting the collar to the body of the sweater that goes from this arm's-eye seam to that arm's-eye seam. Before we continue, I just want to highlight the difference between our irregularly shaped cardigan and a normal cardigan sweater like this one. Usually a cardigan is comprised of two front pieces, two sleeve pieces, a front placket that may also be the collar piece like on this sweater, and a back piece. On our blue sweater, the front pieces, collar, and front placket are all the same piece. We still have two sleeve pieces and a back piece, but that's the only similarity between this normal cardigan and our irregular one. If your sweater has buttonholes on the front closure, that will prevent you from unraveling that side of the placket, but the side with the buttons on it can still be saved. You'll want to start by removing any tags, labels, hang loops, or buttons that are sewn into your sweater with your seam ripper, as they will prevent you from pulling your sweater apart smoothly. Now we can start to take apart the sweater. I always start with the side seams. Remember to inspect both sides of your seam for the line of little V's, and once you locate them, start at the end of the seam by the top open part of the V. Usually on commercially made sweaters, that ends up being the sleeve cuff. Find your magic thread and pull. The magic thread doesn't always pull out super smoothly. Sometimes it gets caught and doesn't want to pull any further. If this happens to you, don't worry. Try taking hold of both sides of the seam allowance and giving them a gentle tug open. With this sweater, I ended up needing to pull a little harder, both on the sweater and on the magic thread, as you can see. But eventually I got it to work, and so will you. Don't forget, if the magic thread ever gets lost or breaks, you can always find it again by repeating the steps outlined in part 2 of my series detailing how to find the magic thread. Et voila! On to the next step. Once you have the side seams open, head for the arm's-eye seams. Again, inspect both sides of the seam to locate the line of V's, and, once found, start at the end of the seam by the top open part of the V. Find the magic thread and pull. Repeat these same steps on the other sleeve. Now that we have the arm's-eye, side, and back seams open, we can turn our attention to the seam holding the collar to the body of the sweater. My sweater has this seam binding sewn on here, and I'll need to remove that completely before I can start looking for V's. As you're seam ripping, be careful to only catch the thread holding the binding to the sweater, as you risk damaging the yarn you're trying to save. I know you're riveted by my sweet seam ripping skills, but I'm going to skip ahead. I'll see you later! Once that's done, we can attack this seam. Again, inspect both sides of the seam to locate the line of V's, and once found, start at the end of the seam by the top open part of the V. Find the magic thread and pull. Last but not least, we need to liberate this peplum/front placket/collar by opening the center back seam. Again, inspect both sides of the seam to locate the line of V's, and once you find them, start at the end of the seam by the top open part of the V. Find the magic thread and pull. And that's it! All our sweater pieces are completely separated. Now we can set about unraveling our sweater. We have the sweater broken down into these irregularly shaped pieces: the peplum, front placket, and collar piece, the two sleeve pieces, and the back body piece. Each sweater piece will have some sort of bind off at the top, just like if you were to bind off your own piece of hand knitting. You'll need to remove this bind off before you can start unraveling. When you have an irregular sweater shape like this, sometimes it's hard to tell where the top is to start the process. The rule of V's still applies here, so if you're not sure what end is the top, always check which way the V's are pointing. As always, start at the top, open part of the V. Now that we've located the top bind off, you'll notice that it also looks like a line of V's. Locate the end of the binding next to the open top part of the V and find the magic thread. Once the binding is removed, you can unravel the whole sweater piece as one long strand of yarn. Unravel each piece and you'll have a whole bunch of new yarn to work with, as each sweater uses upwards of 1,000 yards of yarn. Sometimes, during unraveling, the reclaimed yarn will have separated into its plies like this yarn did. This drives me nuts, so I always run my reclaimed yarn through my spinning wheel to reset the twist in the yarn like this. And that makes it like new again. It's so much nicer to work with this way. But if you do decide to do this, make sure to soak your yarn in hot water afterwards to set the twist. And that's how you take apart an irregularly shaped cardigan sweater. If at any time while you're taking apart your sweater you feel in over your head, feel free to go to my Etsy shop where I've done all the work for you. There are many skeins of beautifully colored reclaimed sweater yarn up for grabs there, including the sweater we worked on today. Thank you so much for joining me for this guide, and I hope this helps you breathe new life into all your unwanted sweaters. If you liked this video, hit the like button, subscribe to my YouTube channel, or find me on Instagram for more fiber how-tos and experiments. Happy crafting!